Spider-Man is a character that means a lot to me, and I know I'm not special in saying that, but he was basically my childhood superhero. I really looked up to him and his creator, Stan Lee. Stan Lee's death hit me really hard, and after he died, I was reminded of what Spider-Man really meant to me and a lot of people, and it's something that I feel like a lot of Spider-Man movies haven't been getting right ever since the second Spider-Man movie, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2. And so I haven't really been happy with any of the Spider-Man movies since Spider-Man 2. I didn't like either of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man Homecoming was a good movie, but it didn't really have the emotional punch to it that those first two Sam Raimi movies did. And I feel like that's because it didn't really hit the mark with the character. It didn't quite understand what people loved about the character so much. I wasn't really sure what to think of Into the Spider-Verse when I saw the trailers, so I was pretty pessimistic and I didn't know how I felt about the animation either. But by the time the last trailer rolled around, I was warming up to it and I was thinking that it might be pretty good. So I went into this movie and I absolutely loved it. This is probably my favorite movie of the year, and I did not expect to say that about this movie, but it really did. It hit me really hard. It hit me like I want a Spider-Man movie to hit me. It understood what this character is and why people like him. You know, it's not about him being cool. It's not about his, gadgets or how he fits into some sort of larger, Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's about this regular dude who has a hard life and all these responsibilities to juggle. And then on top of this, he literally has the weight of the world, what feels like, on his shoulders because, he's Spider-Man. He's stopping all this crime and stuff. And so he's a very relatable character to your average person, and that's why everybody loves him. And this movie gets that. And it really focuses on the fact that Spider-Man is just a regular dude trying to juggle all of these responsibilities and trying to do the right thing. As a result, the highs feel higher and the lows feel lower. You feel every emotional beat really, really strongly. This movie just really understands the message that Stan Lee was trying to convey behind this character and why Stan Lee considers this his favorite Marvel superhero. It really did make me fall in love with the Spider-Man character again. It gave me some of the same emotional feelings that I feel when I watch the first two Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And full disclosure, I actually cry when I watch Spider-Man 2 because I feel like it's just so inspiring and it's been such an important movie in my life. And this movie gave me some of the same feelings. It made me tear up because of the sheer inspiration from it. And so for that, it is my favorite Spider-Man movie besides the first two Sam Raimi movies. I think it beats Homecoming by a mile. And like I said, I even thought Homecoming was a pretty good movie. Miles Morales, I didn't know a whole lot about his character going into the movie. I don't read comics a whole lot, and so I didn't know a lot about the Miles Morales Spider-Man, but the way they executed his story and told his story within this, larger Spider-Verse was fantastic, as was the story of every other Spider-Man character in this movie. It's also really self-aware that it's yet another Spider-Man movie in a sea of different movie versions of the character, and it references that and makes fun of itself for being another Spider-Man movie that isn't connected to the rest in really fun and smart ways. And then on top of that, it uses this, Spider-Man continuity problem in real life to help, make fun of its Spider-Man continuity problem within its own fiction. And so I think it's a really smart, really fun movie in that regard. I also didn't expect it to have commentary on certain social and entertainment trends, but it does. It very clearly has this commentary on the current, young adult novel, I'm the chosen one, I'm special kind of narrative that you see with movies like, freaking Mortal Engines, which also came out this weekend, where the main characters, you're the only one that can stop the bad guys, you're the special person in this story. And this movie kind of says, you know what, that's not a great storyline to have, and it's really not something to aspire to be. You don't want to be the most special person in the world because then you can't relate to people. Then people can't relate to you. People can't help you through struggles. And it shows that you're really not all that special. People are more alike than you think they are, and that's not a bad thing. That doesn't diminish who you are. It doesn't diminish who they are. It just means that you can relate to people and they can relate to you, and you can help each other get through struggles. And it makes you stronger knowing that you are more similar to people than you think, rather than just thinking you're the most special person in the world and you can do whatever the hell you want, because that is what creates the problems. The characters are great all around. I enjoyed all of them. I thought Miles Morales was, of course, great. The Peter Parker of this movie, who's sort of like a lazy slob, I thought he was great and his character art was great. Spider-Gwen is another character that I didn't really know a lot about going into the movie. She's a fairly new iteration of the sort of Spider-Man character, but I really enjoyed her character. I wasn't really sure how I would react to her, but I really enjoyed her a lot. As for the other characters, the little anime Spider-Girl and Spider-Noir, played by Nicolas Cage, and the Spider-Pig, or he's called Spider-Ham or something, I don't really know. They were all entertaining. They don't really have really deep backstories or anything, because at that point, the backstories have just become a joke within the movie. They're basically comedic relief characters. And I've heard some people complain that, those characters just don't even need to be in the movie. But at the same time, my defense of that is that they don't weigh the movie down either, and they do add to the movie in that, like a good comedic relief character should, they add really good comedy to the movie, really good levity to the movie, and they don't detract anything from the movie. I'm not, I wasn't sitting there watching the movie and saying, man, I really wish, Spider-Noir and Spider-Pig weren't in this movie. And if you want to sit here and complain about this movie's comic relief characters not being necessary to the plot, well, you can say that about a lot of movies with comic relief characters. That doesn't necessarily negate the facts that they're doing their job within the movie. And speaking of comedic relief characters, this movie was really, really funny. It doesn't just hit hard emotionally with the inspiration and everything, but it's also really funny. The guys who directed this movie also directed 21 Jump Street, if I'm not mistaken, and so they really know how to write comedy, and this movie is really funny. The post-credit scene, which I'm not going to spoil, but stay for the post-credit scene if you haven't seen this movie, because I think it is one of the best post-credit scene, if not the best post-credit scene that I've ever seen. It is gut-bustingly funny. Everything you've heard about this movie's animation, of course, is true. It looks fantastic. It is incredibly inventive and creative. Like everyone else says, it looks just like a comic book. You can tell this was made by a team of people who really believed in the storytelling potential and creativity of animation. The animation in this movie was so creative that even the opening studio logos were entertaining to watch at the beginning of the movie. So I was really impressed with the animation, even though when this movie was first announced and we first got footage of it, I wasn't sure what to think of it. This movie also has a jab at people who wouldn't take this movie seriously just because it's animated, and I thought that was really great. This movie is pretty clearly inspired by foreign animation, especially anime. That's apparent with, the anime character in this movie, but also there's certain scenes and certain shots in the movie that you can tell are inspired by classic anime movies, especially Akira. And so you can tell this was made by people who do think animation can tell serious, mature stories and that want this movie to be taken seriously, just like any other Spider-Man movie would be taken seriously. And of course, they did it. It worked, because I definitely took this movie seriously the entire time. Like I said, they told a really good story with this movie. Now, the problems I have with this movie are minor at most. The way they use spider sense in this movie is pretty different. Basically, they can use spider sense to sense each other. So whenever they meet a new Spider-Man, they're like, oh, you're like me, which I thought was weird at first. And I was like, what is this? Is this some sort of plot convenience? But it's not, because they keep using it consistently in that same way. And so with this movie being creative and inventive, and with them taking so many creative risks, it just makes sense in this Spider-Man universe within this movie. And because they were so consistent about it, it's really not something that I can hold against the movie. I also really didn't like the Kingpin's design in this movie. I thought it looked really ridiculous. He looked like this giant hunched over block. I can't totally blame this movie for having an inferior version of the Kingpin, though, because I was constantly comparing him to the Kingpin of Daredevil, which is, of course, so great and will define that character for ages to come. They did a decent job with Kingpin and his story in this movie. It does pale in comparison with the Daredevil portrayal of this character, but there's nothing really you can do to help that. But I do have a serious gripe with the way they designed his character, because he just looks ridiculous and it's kind of hard to take him seriously. But then again, even with the fantastic portrayal of the character in Daredevil, sometimes I can't take this Kingpin seriously, so I don't know how much I can count this against the movie. But the flaws in this movie are incredibly minimal. And the things that are great about this movie definitely far outweigh the things that aren't so great. I'm definitely going to be seeing this movie again. I'm wondering if my opinion will change on it at all when I see it next time, because again, I came out of this movie absolutely floored. I think it's my favorite movie of the year so far, which again, I did not expect it to take my top spot. But I'm going to go ahead and say that I think that this movie is a comic book masterpiece. And I know my opinion doesn't count for shit, but that's just the way I feel about it. And I'm also giving this my first watch award. I'm a very time-conscious person, and even when I really enjoy a movie in the theater, I tend to glance at my watch a few times. And there's very few movies that I ever watch for the first time that I don't glance at my watch at all. And this was definitely one of them. I was glued to the screen for the entire runtime. It just flew by for me, and I didn't even glance at my watch one time. So I give this movie the Watch Award. And I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. That might change to a 9 after I see it again. Who knows? But for now, like I said, the flaws are so minimal, and this movie is so great that I feel like it deserves a 10 just because of how exceptional this movie is for me and how much it personally affects me and how much I feel about it and how it reconnects me, again, with this character that I grew up with and that means so much to me. And so, yeah, this movie is awesome. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Until next time, I'm Randall the Vandal, and thank you guys so much for watching.